My little brother Danny drowned on a Tuesday afternoon off the end of our dock while I was 30 feet away not watching him. I pulled him out blue and cold and not breathing, and I did everything right, and he came back. That's not the scary part. I need you to understand that, because everyone who hears this story thinks that drowning is the horror, and it isn't. The horror is that the lake let me have him back. The horror is the 9 days after. We were at the cabin. It's been in our family forever. A little place on a deep cold lake up in the woods, an hour past anywhere with a name. That summer our parents were moving house, so I took Danny up for the last week of August to get him out of the chaos. I was 28. He was 12. Loud, sunburned, obsessed with finding the biggest possible rock to cannonball off the dock. The kind of kid who fills a room. The kind of kid you cannot imagine the world being quieter without. It was a cold, ordinary afternoon. I was up on the porch with a beer and a paperback, and Danny was off the dock the way he'd been off the dock 1,000 times. And I heard the splash, and I went back to my book. That's the thing I live with. I went back to my book. It was maybe 2 minutes before the quiet registered as wrong. No shouting, no second splash, no watch this, just the lake, flat and patient. And I looked up and the dock was empty. I have never moved like that in my life. I was off the porch and down the lawn and into the water, screaming his name, and the lake near the dock drops off fast. You go from waist deep to over your head in one step, and the water down there is cold even in August, a deep, ancient cold. I went under and grabbed and found nothing, again and again, and then my hand closed on his wrist, and he was further down than a kid sinks in 2 minutes, much further, like something had been bringing him down. I got him onto the dock and he was the wrong color, that blue-gray you never forget once you've seen it, and his lips were almost black, and there was no breath in him at all. I did CPR. I'd done a course years ago, and I don't remember deciding to do any of it. My hands just did it, and I counted and I begged and I pushed, and on what felt like the 100th compression, he convulsed, and a column of water came out of him. Not a cough, not a mouthful, a column, gray lake water pouring up out of my little brother like I'd cracked a pipe. More water than a body could hold, soaking the boards, and then he dragged in a breath, this awful tearing wet gasp, and his eyes opened, and he looked at me, and he said, "I'm cold," and I started crying so hard I could barely hold him, because he was alive, he was talking, he knew me. I wrapped him in every towel in the cabin, and held him and told him he was okay. He was okay. I had him, and I believed it. That's the part I'd take back if I could. Not the book, the believing. Here's what I should have done. I should have called an ambulance and let them take him to a hospital an hour away and keep him overnight, the way you're supposed to with a drowning, because of the things water does to lungs hours later. But he was sitting up, pink coming back into his face, asking for hot chocolate, embarrassed already, telling me to stop crying. He seemed completely fine. We had no signal up there anyway, and the nearest landline was the gas station 20 minutes off. So I made a decision that felt like love, and was actually the worst thing I have ever done. I decided he was all right. I put him to bed. I checked on him 4 times that night, and every time he was sleeping. And every time I touched his forehead, he was cold. The cold was the first thing. By the next morning I told myself the lake had just chilled him deep, that he'd warm up. But he didn't. All that day Danny was cold to the touch, not feverish cold, not clammy sick, but cold like something kept in a cellar. And damp. His skin had this faint, constant moisture to it, like the outside of a glass of ice water, beating up no matter how many times I toweled him off. He sat in the hot afternoon sun on the dock for an hour, and when I put my hand on his shoulder he was cool and wet as a stone from the bottom of a creek. He said he felt fine. He said it a lot. I feel fine, but he'd gone quiet. Danny, who never stopped talking, would sit and look out at the water for long stretches, and I'd have to say his name twice. The second day I found the puddles, little ones at first. A patch of damp on his bed sheets in the morning that smelled, not like a kid who'd wet the bed, but like the lake, that green, silty, cold stone smell. A wet ring on the wooden chair where he'd been sitting. Wet footprints leading from his room to the window that faced the water and back to bed, that I knew I hadn't seen him make. I started sleeping in his room. I told myself it was so I'd hear him if his lungs went bad. The truth is I'd started to be afraid of my own little brother, and I hated myself for it, and I was right to be. The third day I caught the reflection thing, and that was when I stopped being able to pretend. We were on the dock and Danny was lying on his stomach looking down into the water, the way he used to look for fish, and I crouched next to him and looked down too, at the two of us reflected on that black mirror surface. And there was only one of us. There was me, and next to my reflection there was just the dark water and the pale shape of the dock, and no Danny, even though he was right there, his face a foot from the surface, looking down into a reflection that wasn't his. He didn't seem to notice. I made some excuse and got him inside, and I sat in the bathroom and shook. That night, I woke up at 3, and his bed was empty, and the wet footprints went out the door. I went down to the lake in bare feet, calling his name as quietly as I could, which is a strange thing to do, to look for a child while trying not to be heard, but every animal part of me said, do not let it know you're coming. And I came around the boathouse, and I saw him. Danny was out in the lake, chest deep, maybe 40 feet from shore, standing perfectly still in water up to his collarbones, facing away from me, facing the middle of the lake where it's deepest and blackest. Not swimming, not playing, standing the way you stand in a room, waiting for someone, in water way over a 12-year-old's head, except he was standing in it like there was a floor. I said his name. He didn't move. I waded in after him, into that cold that grabbed my legs like hands, and I got to him and took his shoulder and turned him around, and his face was calm and empty, and his eyes were open and full of the dark, and he looked at me and he said, in a flat little voice that was his voice, and was nothing like him, "It's not so bad down there. It's just quiet. They're waiting for the rest of me." And I said, "What, Danny? What are you talking about?" And something behind his eyes seemed to surface, and he blinked, and he was my brother again, confused and shivering and 12, saying, "Why are we in the water? I'm cold, I want to go in." And he didn't remember walking down. He didn't remember any of it. I got him out, and here's the part I've never told anyone, the part I can still feel on my hands. As I pulled him up onto the dock, he started to cough, and the water came out of him again. Not from the drowning. This was 4 days later. Cold, gray lake water running out of his mouth and his nose in a steady stream while he was breathing, while he was talking, while he was saying, I'm okay. Water just pouring out of him onto the boards and not stopping. More water than he could possibly hold. The lake running out of my brother and him not even seeming to notice it was happening. That was when I understood, all the way down, the thing I'd been refusing to understand since the dock. The lake didn't give Danny back. The lake doesn't give anything back. It kept him. What it let me pull out and do CPR on and carry up to bed was the part it hadn't finished taking yet. And every day since, quietly, patiently, it had been calling the rest of him home. The cold was the lake, the wet was the lake, the puddles, the reflection, the standing in the water at night facing the deep. That was the lake reeling him in a little more each night, and what was left of my actual brother was getting smaller and colder and further away, and soon there wasn't going to be any Danny left to come up to the window at all. I packed the car that night. I was going to drive him to a hospital, a church, anywhere with no water in it. I didn't have a plan. I just knew we had to get away from that lake. I got our bags in the trunk, and I went back inside for him. He wasn't in his bed. The cabin door was open, and the wet footprints went down the lawn toward the water, and they did not come back. I found him at the end of the dock, in his pajamas, looking out at the water, and he turned around when he heard me, and he smiled, and for a second it was the most Danny he'd been in days. This big, sad smile, and he said, "It's okay." They said it's okay. It's really quiet, and you don't have to be cold anymore once you're all the way in. And he said, "I'm mostly already there anyway." And he was right. I could see it. There was so little of him left in his face. And I stood at the foot of the dock with my keys in my hand, and I had a choice. I could run out there and drag him back one more time, and have a little less of my brother for one more cold day, and do it again the next night, and the next, until there was nothing left to carry but a wet, cold thing that wore his face. Or I could let the lake have what it had already taken. I didn't move. God help me, I didn't move. I let my little brother walk to the edge of the dock and step off into water so black and so still it didn't even splash. He went under like he was being lowered. There was no thrashing. The water closed over the top of his head and went flat and smooth, and the dock light shone on it, and it was quiet, and he did not come up. He did not come up. They never found a body. Of course they didn't. The lake doesn't give anything back. I'm the only person it ever made that mistake with, and it corrected it. The cabin's still ours. My family can't understand why I'll never go up there again, why I won't so much as look at the photos, why I moved to a dry brown city in the middle of the country, as far from open water as I could get. But I have to tell you the last thing, because it's why I don't sleep, and it's why I'm telling you it all instead of just carrying it. Since that night I'm cold, all the time, deep down cold, the kind that no blanket fixes, the kind that beads up faint and damp on my skin in a warm room. And lately, the last few weeks, I've started waking up at 3 a.m. standing at my apartment window, 11 floors up, in the middle of a dry city, standing at the glass in the dark, facing north. The lake is north. It didn't just take Danny that summer. It got its hand on me too, in that cold water, reaching for him. The lake takes its time. It's patient. It has all the time in the world, and it isn't finished with me.